Please comment where you are watching in the world. Out here in Wyoming, we've got a saying, don't squat with your spurs on. It basically means, don't do something stupid that's gonna come back to bite you. Well, I should have remembered that before I signed up for Farmers Only. Now, I'm not usually the one to go onto dating apps. I've got my ranch, my horses, and a good dog named Buck. What else does a girl need, right? But one night, after a particularly long day of mending fences and chasing a runaway calf, I figured, why not? It's not like Mr. Right's gonna come wandering out of the hayfield with a dozen roses. So I made myself a profile. Kept it simple. Rancher, horse lover, looking for someone who knows the difference between a steer and a heifer. A week in, I matched with a guy named Cody. His profile picture was him on a horse, tipping his hat in that way that makes you think he just stepped out of a country music video. He had one of those faces that looked like it had been carved out of granite, a real Marlboro Man type. And his bio: cowboy, rodeo champ, lover of wide open spaces. Well, shoot. How could I not swipe right? Cody messaged me first, which I appreciated. None of that playing it cool nonsense. He was charming, talked about his ranch, and said he'd just won a bucking bronco competition down in Texas. I was impressed, I won't lie. We chatted for a bit before he asked me to dinner. How about we meet at the Hitching Post, he suggested. It's a little steakhouse on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but good enough to make it worth putting on a clean pair of jeans. I agreed, and we set a date for Friday night. Now, I'm a punctual person. Ranch life does that to you. When a cow's in labor or a storm's rolling in, you don't have the luxury of running late. So, I made sure to get to the restaurant right on time. Cody, on the other hand, didn't seem to share my sense of urgency. I sat there for 20 minutes, sipping my water and staring at the door, wondering if I'd been stood up. Just as I was about to leave, he walked in. Y'all. First of all, he was wearing brand new cowboy boots. I mean shiny, straight out of the box new. No scuffs, no dirt, not a trace of wear. Now, I don't claim to know everything, but I do know this. Real cowboys don't wear boots like that. Real cowboys' boots tell a story. They've seen dirt, manure, and more miles on horseback than you can count. But I thought, okay, maybe he's just trying to look nice for the date. Benefit of the doubt and all that. Then I noticed his hat. It was one of those fancy felt ones, tilted just a little too far forward, like he'd spent more time posing in the mirror than working out in the sun. Still, I smiled and stood up to shake his hand. Cody, nice to meet you, I said. Jesse, he said, tipping his hat. You're even prettier than your pictures. Well, he got points for that. We sat down, and the waitress came over to take our orders. Cody didn't even look at the menu. I'll have the ribeye medium rare, he said, leaning back like he owned the place. I glanced at the waitress. I'll have the same, but make mine rare, please. Once she left, Cody launched into a story about his rodeo days. Now, I love a good rodeo tale as much as anyone, but something about his stories didn't sit right. For one thing, he kept calling bulls cows. I was riding this big OL cow, he said, flapping his arms like he was trying to show me the size. Bull, I corrected. Huh. You were riding a bull, I said. Right. That's what I meant, he said, laughing it off. Uh-huh. As the night went on, it became pretty clear that Cody was more cowboy cosplayer than cowboy. He didn't know the first thing about ranching, couldn't tell a quarter horse from a mule, and when I asked him how many head of cattle he had, he said, "Oh, I don't keep count." What? If you've got cattle, you count them. Every day. Twice on Sundays. That's just how it works. I started to think maybe he didn't have a ranch at all. The final straw came after dinner. Cody insisted on walking me to my truck, which was polite enough. But as we were leaving, he spotted my horse trailer hitched up in the parking lot. "What's that for?" he asked, pointing at it. I blinked at him, thinking maybe he was joking. "It's for my horses," I said slowly. "Oh, right," he said, nodding like he understood. "I've just never seen one up close before." Y'all, I couldn't help myself. I laughed. I really laughed, right there in the parking lot. "You've never seen a horse trailer up close?" I asked, still chuckling. "Nope," he said, looking a little embarrassed. Bless his heart, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But the kicker came when he offered to drive me home. "No thanks," I said, opening my truck door. "I've got my own ride." "Well, can I at least call you sometime?" he asked, looking hopeful. I thought about it for a second. Cody wasn't a bad guy, just not what he claimed to be. "I'll think about it," I said, climbing into the driver's seat. Then I drove straight home, unloaded my horses, and called my best friend, Sarah. "You're not gonna believe this," I said, launching into the story. By the time I finished, she was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. A week later, I found out through a mutual friend that Cody didn't even own a ranch. Turns out, he was a manager at a hardware store in town. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but don't go around pretending you're the Marlboro Man if you've never even mucked out a stall. Needless to say, I deleted my Farmers Only account after that. Out here in Wyoming, we've got a saying, don't squat with your spurs on. It basically means, don't do something stupid that's going to come back to bite you. Well, I should have remembered that before I signed up for Farmers Only. Now, I'm not usually the one to go onto dating apps. I've got my ranch, my horses, and a good dog named Buck. What else does a girl need, right? But one night, after a particularly long day of mending fences and chasing a runaway calf, I figured, why not? It's not like Mr. Right's gonna come wandering out of the hayfield with a dozen roses. So I made myself a profile. Kept it simple. Rancher, horse lover, looking for someone who knows the difference between a steer and a heifer. A week in, I matched with a guy named Cody. His profile picture was him on a horse, tipping his hat in that way that makes you think he just stepped out of a country music video. He had one of those faces that looked like it had been carved out of granite, a real Marlboro Man type. And his bio: cowboy, rodeo champ, lover of wide open spaces. Well, shoot. How could I not swipe right? Cody messaged me first, which I appreciated. None of that playing it cool nonsense. He was charming, talked about his ranch, and said he'd just won a bucking bronco competition down in Texas. I was impressed, I won't lie. We chatted for a bit before he asked me to dinner. How about we meet at the Hitching Post, he suggested. It's a little steakhouse on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but good enough to make it worth putting on a clean pair of jeans. I agreed, and we set a date for Friday night. Now, I'm a punctual person. Ranch life does that to you. When a cow's in labor or a storm's rolling in, you don't have the luxury of running late. So, I made sure to get to the restaurant right on time. Cody, on the other hand, didn't seem to share my sense of urgency. I sat there for 20 minutes, sipping my water and staring at the door, wondering if I'd been stood up. Just as I was about to leave, he walked in. Y'all. First of all, he was wearing brand new cowboy boots. I mean shiny, straight out of the box new. No scuffs, no dirt, not a trace of wear. Now, I don't claim to know everything, but I do know this. Real cowboys don't wear boots like that. Real cowboys' boots tell a story. They've seen dirt, manure, and more miles on horseback than you can count. But I thought, okay, maybe he's just trying to look nice for the date. Benefit of the doubt and all that. Then I noticed his hat. It was one of those fancy felt ones, tilted just a little too far forward, like he'd spent more time posing in the mirror than working out in the sun. Still, I smiled and stood up to shake his hand. Cody, nice to meet you, I said. Jesse, he said, tipping his hat. You're even prettier than your pictures. Well, he got points for that. We sat down, and the waitress came over to take our orders. Cody didn't even look at the menu. I'll have the ribeye medium rare, he said, leaning back like he owned the place. I glanced at the waitress. I'll have the same, but make mine rare, please. Once she left, Cody launched into a story about his rodeo days. Now, I love a good rodeo tale as much as anyone, but something about his stories didn't sit right. For one thing, he kept calling bulls cows. I was riding this big OL cow, he said, flapping his arms like he was trying to show me the size. Bull, I corrected. Huh. You were riding a bull, I said. Right. That's what I meant, he said, laughing it off. Uh-huh. As the night went on, it became pretty clear that Cody was more cowboy cosplayer than cowboy. He didn't know the first thing about ranching, couldn't tell a quarter horse from a mule, and when I asked him how many head of cattle he had, he said, "Oh, I don't keep count." What? If you've got cattle, you count them. Every day. Twice on Sundays. That's just how it works. I started to think maybe he didn't have a ranch at all. The final straw came after dinner. Cody insisted on walking me to my truck, which was polite enough. But as we were leaving, he spotted my horse trailer hitched up in the parking lot. "What's that for?" he asked, pointing at it. I blinked at him, thinking maybe he was joking. "It's for my horses," I said slowly. "Oh, right," he said, nodding like he understood. "I've just never seen one up close before." Y'all, I couldn't help myself. I laughed. I mean, I really laughed, right there in the parking lot. "You've never seen a horse trailer up close?" I asked, still chuckling. "Nope," he said, looking a little embarrassed. Bless his heart, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But the kicker came when he offered to drive me home. No thanks, I said, opening my truck door. I've got my own ride. Well, can I at least call you sometime? He asked, looking hopeful. I thought about it for a second. Cody wasn't a bad guy, just not what he claimed to be. I'll think about it, I said, climbing into the driver's seat. Then I drove straight home, unloaded my horses, and called my best friend, Sarah. You're not going to believe this, I said, launching into the story. By the time I finished, she was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. A week later, I found out through a mutual friend that Cody didn't even own a ranch. Turns out, he was a manager at a hardware store in town. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but don't go around pretending you're the Marlboro Man if you've never even mucked out a stall. Needless to say, I deleted my Farmers Only account after that. When I tell you Charleston is a small town wrapped up in a big city's clothes, I mean it. Everybody knows everybody, or at least somebody who knows somebody. That's why, when my best friend Claire suggested I give online dating a shot, I nearly laughed her straight out of my house. Claire, I said, sipping on my sweet tea, you know as well as I do that if I so much as sneeze in the wrong direction, my mama's bridge club will know about it before I can find a tissue. But Claire just rolled her eyes, the way she does when she's about to give me her version of a lecture. Magnolia, honey, if you wait on some charming southern gentleman to stumble into your life while you're browsing the farmer's market, you'll be single until the next Halley's Comet. Now, I don't know much about comets, but I know Claire, and when she gets an idea in her head, there's no shaking it. So, I let her set me up on Bumble. I figured, what's the harm? Swipe a little, chat a little, maybe find a nice guy who doesn't still live with his mama, or think romance means sending me a gif of a winking cowboy. About a week in, I matched with a guy named Travis. He had a decent smile, worked in business, and said he loved dogs. I mean, what else do you need? He asked me to dinner at a little seafood place down by the water. Sounded charming enough. Let me tell you, though, first impressions are everything, and Travis's first impression was, how do I put this nicely? He looked like he'd just crawled out of a shrimp net. I got to the restaurant about 10 minutes early, 'cause that's just how I was raised. You respect people's time, and you don't make 'em wait on you. I was wearing this cute little sundress I'd picked up at a boutique downtown, paired with my favorite pearl earrings. I wasn't trying to look like Scarlett O'Hara or anything, but I put some effort in, you know. Then in walks Travis, and Lord help me, I almost got up and walked right back out. First off, he was late. Not fashionably late, not oops, traffic was bad late. No, sir. Travis strolled in a full 25 minutes after our reservation like he had nowhere better to be. And y'all, his outfit, phew. He was wearing cargo shorts and a wrinkled polo shirt that looked like it had been wadded up on the bathroom floor for 3 days. His hair was doing this thing where it stuck up in the back like he'd slept on it wrong, and there was a faint whiff of something fishy about him, both literally and figuratively. Now, I'm a polite lady. My mama would have tanned my hide if I'd ever been rude to somebody right off the bat, so I smiled and stood to shake his hand. Travis? I asked, even though I already knew it was him. Hey there, Magnolia. Sorry I'm late. Parking was a nightmare, he said, grinning like that excuse was going to save him. For the record, there's a parking garage right behind the restaurant. Plenty of spots. We sit down, and the waitress comes by to take our drink orders. I ask for another sweet tea, and Travis orders a beer. Nothing wrong with a beer, mind you, but he spent a good 2 minutes debating between brands like he was choosing a name for his firstborn child. So, I said, trying to steer the conversation into normal territory, you mentioned in your profile that you're in business. What kind of work do you do? He leaned back in his chair like he was about to tell me the secret to life itself. I'm an entrepreneur, he said. Now, I've lived long enough to know that entrepreneur can mean just about anything. It could mean he runs a successful startup, or it could mean he sells knockoff sunglasses out of the trunk of his car. Oh, that sounds interesting, I said, keeping my smile firmly in place. What kind of business? Import-export, he said, waving his hand like the details weren't important. Uh-huh. The waitress brought our drinks and asked if we were ready to order. I glanced at the menu, but before I could say a word, Travis piped up. Let's get the seafood platter for 2, he said, handing her the menu. Now, I love seafood as much as the next girl, but I wasn't about to let some man I just met decide what I was eating. Actually, I said, speaking up, I'll just have the shrimp and grits, please. The waitress nodded, but Travis looked at me like I'd just insulted his mama. You're not going to share the platter with me? He asked, his tone somewhere between disbelief and annoyance. No, I'm not much for sharing on a first date, I said sweetly. He huffed but didn't press the issue. The conversation, if you could call it that, went downhill faster than a greased pig at the county fair. Travis spent the next 20 minutes talking about himself, his business ventures, his workout routine. That one time he almost made it onto a reality show. Every time I tried to steer the conversation back to something we could both talk about, he'd interrupt me to brag about something else. Oh, you like to read? Yeah, I've been thinking about writing a book. Probably something motivational, you know? People love that kind of stuff. By the time our food arrived, I was seriously considering faking a family emergency just to get out of there. Then came the moment that really took the cake, or the shrimp, as it were. The waitress brought the check and set it down on the table. I reached for my purse, but Travis held up his hand. No, I've got it, he said, all magnanimous-like. I was just about to thank him when he patted his pockets, a look of panic spreading across his face. Oh man, he said, his voice dripping with faux regret. I must have forgotten my wallet. Y'all, I have never in my life wanted to throw a glass of sweet tea in someone's face, but I came real close that night. Now, I'm not one to cause a scene, so I just smiled and pulled out my credit card. Don't worry about it, I said, my voice the kind of sweet that's laced with venom. He had the nerve, the unmitigated gall, to grin at me like I'd just done him the biggest favor in the world. Thanks, Magnolia. I'll pay you back next time. Next time. Bless his heart, there wasn't going to be a next time. I paid the bill, and we walked out of the restaurant. He tried to give me a hug, but I sidestepped him like I was dodging a stray cat. Well, this was fun, he said, clearly delusional. We should do it again sometime. I smiled, the way you do when you're about to tell a lie. Sure thing, Travis. Then I got in my car and drove straight to Claire's house, where I told her every single detail, while she laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch. A week later, I found out through the grapevine, remember what I said about Charleston, that Travis had pulled the same stunt with at least 3 other women. Turns out, entrepreneur was just his fancy way of saying freeloader. Needless to say, I deleted Bumble after that. And if you're wondering whether I've given up on finding my charming southern gentleman, don't you worry. I've just decided to stick to the farmer's market. At least there, the worst thing I have to deal with is a bad batch of peaches. The end. My freshman, I believe, year of college, I met a girl on MySpace. She seemed nice, and the pictures looked rather flattering. Jokes all landed squarely, things were looking good. So we decide to meet. I'm driving through Dayton, going through rougher and rougher parts of town, until I finally come upon this ramshackle POS house in a neighborhood that could have doubled for war-torn Bosnia. I knock, and a she-mammoth answers the door, but the hair color and facial arrangement is all wrong, so while turned off, I'm not quite freaking yet, leading me into a dark, dank family room. The place looks like it hasn't seen new furniture since the 70s, and I can barely discern that I'm sitting on a sofa, it being so covered with dirty quilts and blankets. I'm trying to muster all of the courage together I can, because at this point I'm beginning to think I've walked straight into some sort of Silence of the Lambs bait and switch ordeal. The woman says such and such, I can't even remember her name, will be out in a minute, and leaves me there. I then notice a large mentally retarded man sitting on a chair near me, and I realize that SpongeBob is on the TV. So I begin to make very awkward conversation with a very retarded man about a very retarded TV show. He guffaws, I shuffle uncomfortably, waiting for my internet princess to arrive. And she does. And she's a wildebeest. An abomination straight from the heart of the worst B-movie slasher flicks. The angles treated her well, hiding every fold, every facial flaw, every facet of pure despair in her physical being. The amazing cleavage shots. Why yes, quite possible when each of your breasts are the size and shape of sagging, partially deflated soccer balls. Some additional awkward small talk passes, and we leave. Her in some kind of delirious half-crazed mania, me reminding myself that purposefully crashing my car into a tree at high speed is not only bad form, but rough on my insurance payments. The entire ride over she tells me how she's never seen a car as nice as mine. Now at this point, I still had my little Ford ZX2, and while it was a decent car for a college kid, it certainly wasn't anything even resembling an enviable vehicle. It was a college kid's little Econobox sports coupe, replete with missing fog light, scraped bumpers, and numerous burn holes. But to hear this girl talk, or rasp, it depended on how deep into her cigarette she was. We were cruising around town in the Shangri-La of automobiles. Screw your Mercedes, Daddy's driving an Escort. We got dinner at some little chain restaurant. The food was passable, the conversation droll, and terribly uninteresting. I contemplated drowning myself in my soup at least 3 times. However, the soup was the brightest part of the evening thus far, so I was wary to ruin it with my face. I pick up the check, partially because I like to think that not all chivalry is dead, but more so that it meant I owed her nothing. I take her back to her place, and she invites me in. I am young and stupid, and I accept. Her wildebeest friend, profoundly retarded brother, this information I had gleaned from our dinner conversation. Her and myself all sit around making small talk. Then she starts talking about butt sex, about how she lost a bet and had to do it, but she took it like a trooper. Took it like a trooper, in the pooper. The whole time she kept making very, very obvious stares in my direction, like I was supposed to take up a broom and lead the charge deep into the Hershey Highway, hell-bent on making the experience as memorable as possible. It was at that point, I believe, that my soul died. I make up some lame excuse, exam, drunk friend, sudden recession of the testicles, and leave. She follows me into the yard and puts her considerable arms around me, doing her best attempt at a doe-eyed stare. Nice to meet you. Sure, I'll call you. I have to go. We'll talk to you later. Bye. I was 1 second of eye contact from going gay. These are fun. Here we go. About 5 years ago, I received a message on MySpace. It was a decent-looking redhead that lived in my area. We shared a few similar interests, and we got to chatting. She was going to school for creative writing, had a decent sense of humor, was into some of the dorky shit I was into. Seemed like a catch. A jazz club had just opened up in the city we lived in, so I asked her if she'd like to go check it out with me. She sounded pretty excited about the idea. Friday rolled around, and I called her as I got off work to confirm plans. She asked if her friend could go. She said she had never met anyone online, and was nervous. I found this completely understandable, so I said it was okay. I drove a pickup truck at the time, so I let her know that I likely wouldn't have room for 3 people. I asked if she or her friend could drive. She told me neither of them owned a car. I thought this was a little weird, but whatever, maybe they take the bus. I don't know. Instead of stuffing into my truck, we decided on pizza and a couple movies instead. I went to Blockbuster and called her up, asking what she'd like to see. After I went down the new release list, she picked a couple out. I paid and asked for directions to her apartment. She said she was pretty terrible with directions. Her friend would help me out. She gave me the worst directions I've ever heard. I drove around for a bit, attempting to find it on my own. No luck. I called back and she gave me even worse directions. I called back again a little bit later after still not finding my way. More bad directions. I called back once more, and she tried to help again. There was something about her voice. It did sound a little retarded. I finally find the place and knock on the door. Her friend answered the door. She was retarded. Well, okay, I can respect having a friend like that. It shows you're a good person and all that. Her friend informed me that Rachel would be out in a few minutes. After those few minutes, she came down the hallway. She had an awful limp. She had palsy. She didn't tell me. She offers me pizza, but I decline, as I've lost any appetite I had. I toss in the movie. I can't remember what it was. It was a generic serial killer horror movie. The retarded girl is enjoying her Dominoes. I'm on the couch with Rachel, trying to keep things from being too awkward. In the movie, the blonde girl is masturbating. Through the window, a truck pulls up. The serial killer steps out. The retarded girl turns to us with the biggest smile on her face. Cheese and other assorted bits of pizza were falling from her mouth onto the floor. I'll never forget the words out of her mouth. He had better come back, I'm going to get off or die trying. I stared in horror as she laughed her ass off, spraying pizza across the room. I half-heartedly offered a bit of a pity laugh, while Rachel sat there mortified. The girl then told me I smelled good. The movie was finally over. We didn't start the other movie, as it was midnight, and I had claimed I had to work in the morning. I asked if she could return the movies, and she agreed. I gave Rachel a hug, hopped in my truck, and bolted. I went home and smoked a huge joint. Another story to add. First, a little backstory. I'm working in a college computer lab. I see my boss leave a few times with a truly stunning girl. She's tall, medium brown hair, big blue eyes, beautiful smile, great chest, just a really gorgeous girl. I'm wondering, what's he doing so right? He leaves early one night, and we get to talking. She invites me out to dinner, and being the lonely, awkward nerd that I am, I immediately jumped at the chance. We have an amazing night, got to know each other well, in multiple ways. Turns out my boss directed local theater groups, and she was in drama club in middle school and high school. He directed many of her plays. So, they're really good friends and all. That's cool. We date for a few weeks, things are going great. She calls me crying one night. They would jog together at night after he got off work. While they were at his apartment afterward, he tried to force himself on her and feel her up. I was of course righteously pissed, but seeing as how he was my boss, I decided to let it slide this time. So about a month in, she asks if I'm busy. She wants to go see a performance of The Diary of Anne Frank at her old high school. I'm okay with that. Sure. So, we get there, and sure enough the boss shows up. This was about a week after their incident. We get our tickets, and he decides to sit next to us, the girl being in the middle. As she snuggles up to me, kissing on me and such, he's just shooting me the foulest looks and grumbling to himself. So play is over. My date knows a good number of the kids in it from the local community theater group. She's talking to them, and they invite us to the after party. She wants to go, so I say bugger it. I'll probably get laid, might as well, right? So, we get to this girl's parents' house. It's full of high school kids, mostly around 15 to 16. I'm about 23 at the time. I had a full beard and look older than I am. I was very out of place. I had never hung around the drama club crowd before. I now know why. I've yet to meet a group of more obnoxious, loud, hyperactive, attention-whoring people. No offense if you're into that sort of thing, but I'm not the sort of person who can deal with it. Just about as soon as we got there, the girl I was with got a phone call and walked into a room to talk, away from the noise. She stayed there for the entire 2 hours we were there. I was alone in this hellhole. So these kids are running around insane. There's a brother and sister there. They were weird. They were playing an improv-type game. People were shouting things out, and the people in the middle had to act it out. There was some very suggestive behavior between the two. It was really odd and creepy. No one else seemed bothered by it, but I was very weirded out. Seeing a brother pretend to hump his sister is just bizarre. At one point I decide to go outside and have a smoke. I get about halfway through my Camel Light, and I hear a weird metallic noise. I'm looking around trying to figure out what it is. Sounds like change in someone's pocket or something. I see a giant shadow on the next house over appear. It's a dog. The dog steps around the front of the house and looks at me. It's a big dog. Oh son. At about the same time I register that I should probably be crapping my pants, this dog takes off full blast toward me, barking and growling. I run to the front door, open it, run inside, and slam the door behind me. The room falls completely silent. Every one of those kids turns to look at me like I'm nuts. I'm winded, out of breath from running for my life. I manage to get the words, huge dog, out. They look at me like, what the F are you doing here anyway? Then turn around and continue their weird little games. Finally, the girl I'm with comes out and is ready to go. Praise Jeebus. We hop in the car, and she wants to meet up with a friend. We pick her friend up, and I graciously offer her the front seat, since the girl I'm dating is driving. They decide they want to drive around and listen to music. Okay, sure. They put in the soundtrack to Evita. That's followed by the soundtrack to Spice World. That's followed by Grease. We're driving around for hours listening to this shit. I'm staring up at the sky through the back window, wishing as hard as I can wish for some ice picks to jab into my eardrums. I smell something odd and look up. Smoke is pouring out from under the hood. The engine is overheating. F me. I get the girl to pull over and I pop the hood. She has no coolant in the plastic tank. After the car sits for a bit, I open the radiator cap. It's dry. I just want to go home at this point, so I volunteer to walk to a gas station and get a jug of coolant. I'm walking through the hood at about 3 a.m. I'm feeling a mixture of fear and bravado, wishing someone would mess with me just so I could punch someone in the head. After about a half hour, I make it to the gas station, buy the coolant, and start walking back. I make it back to the car and fill the radiator up. The car runs fine. She drops her friend back off at her car, and we head back to her place. When we pull up, she thanks me for saving her. Of course, anything for a pretty girl and her vag. I lean in for a kiss, and she turns away. What the F? I'm tired, Nathan. I'm just ready to go to bed. I don't want to get anything started we can't finish. Not even a kiss. Not tonight. I hopped in my truck and drove home, smoking about 5 cigarettes on the half-hour drive. There's an old saying in Texas, all hat, no cattle. It means someone's putting on a show, but doesn't have the goods to back it up. I'd heard that phrase my whole life growing up in Austin, but I'd never really understood it until I went on one of the most ridiculous dates of my 32 years. Now, let me paint you a picture of me. I'm Devin, tech guy, born and raised in Austin, and the proud owner of a startup that somehow hasn't gone bankrupt yet. I'm not flashy. I drive a used truck, wear jeans to work, and still eat at taco trucks 3 times a week. But after a buddy of mine told me I needed to get out there, I decided to give Tinder a shot. What could go wrong? Well, let me tell you. That's how I ended up matching with Claire. Her profile was like a marketing pitch. Lover of life, luxury, and adventure. Looking for someone who can keep up. Her pictures looked like they were pulled straight out of a glossy magazine. One of her on a yacht, another with a designer purse I couldn't pronounce, and one with her posing in front of a private jet. Now, I'm not an idiot. I know what kind of woman posts pictures like that. But hey, she was gorgeous, and our chat wasn't half bad. At least, not until she started asking about my job. What do you do for work? She asked. I run a startup, I said, trying to keep it vague. Oh, that's so cool. Tech? She replied, followed by a winking emoji. Yeah, tech, I said. What about you? Oh, I'm in marketing, she said, which sounded reasonable enough. We talked a little more, and before I knew it, she was suggesting dinner. You picked the spot, she said, but I love places with a good wine list. My first red flag. But I figured, why not? Maybe she just has expensive taste. I booked a table at one of the nicer restaurants downtown. Nothing too over the top, but fancy enough to make a good impression. When the night of the date rolled around, I made sure to get there a few minutes early. I'm not the kind of guy who shows up late. It's bad form. Claire, on the other hand, was apparently running on her own schedule. She strolled in 20 minutes late, and let me tell you, she made an entrance. She was wearing this tight black dress that probably cost more than my first car, paired with heels so high I was surprised she didn't need a ladder to get into them. On her arm was a Gucci purse I'd only ever seen in magazines, and she had this hair-flipping, lip-gloss-smacking confidence that screamed, "Look at me." "Devin," she said, flashing me a smile that was just a little too perfect. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful." "Oh, no problem," I said, even though it was definitely a problem. She sat down, barely glanced at the menu, and immediately ordered a glass of wine. "Do you have a sommelier?" she asked the waiter, who looked about as confused as I felt. "We have a wine list," he said, handing her one. "Perfect," she said, without even looking at it. "I'll just take the most expensive glass of Sauvignon Blanc you have." Red flag number 2. I tried to steer the conversation toward normal topics, hobbies, family, the usual first date stuff. But Claire clearly had other priorities. "So," she said, leaning forward in a way that was probably supposed to be seductive. "Tell me about your startup. Is it successful?" "I mean, we're doing all right," I said, trying to sound modest. "We're still growing." "That's amazing," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I love ambitious men. You must be raking it in." Now, I'm not one to brag, but I also didn't want to lie. "We're comfortable," I said. "But I'm definitely not flying private jets or anything." She laughed, this high-pitched, fake-sounding giggle that made me want to check if there was a hidden camera somewhere. "Oh, you're funny," she said. "I bet you could afford it if you wanted to." "I don't know about that," I said, taking a sip of my water. Then the food arrived, and things got even weirder. Claire had ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, medium well, which should have been a crime in itself. But what really got me was what happened next. As we started eating, she pulled out her phone. "Sorry," she said, not looking the least bit sorry. "I just need to check something real quick." She opened FaceTime, yes, FaceTime, right there at the table and called someone. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, as some guy's face appeared on her screen. "Hey babe," Claire said, waving at the phone. "Babe?" I froze, wondering if I'd just walked into a trap. Was this her boyfriend? Her husband? Was I about to get jumped in a fancy steakhouse? But then she said, "It's my stylist. I just needed to ask him about something." Her stylist? I sat there in stunned silence as she launched into a conversation about whether she should buy some $3,000 dress for an upcoming event. "It's gorgeous, right?" she asked, holding up her phone to show me the dress on some website. "Don't you think I'd look amazing in this?" "Sure," I said, not knowing what else to say. "I knew you'd agree," she said, smiling. "You have great taste." Then, without missing a beat, she said, "You should totally buy it for me." I laughed, thinking she was joking. But her face didn't change. She was dead serious. "Wait, what?" I said, setting down my fork. "The dress," she said, like I was the idiot. "You should buy it for me." It'd be a great investment. I'd look so good in it. An investment? I repeated. Exactly, she said, nodding. I mean, if we're going to keep seeing each other, you'd want me to look my best, right? Y'all, I've heard some wild things in my life, but that one took the cake. I think you've got the wrong idea, I said, trying to keep my tone polite. I'm not really in the business of buying $3,000 dresses for people I just met. She stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Wow, she said, leaning back in her chair. I thought you were different. Different how? I asked, genuinely curious. You know, she said, waving her hand. Successful. Generous. The kind of guy who knows how to treat a woman. Generous, sure, I said. But I'm not a walking ATM. She rolled her eyes. Ugh, whatever. Men are so disappointing. At that point, I'd had enough. I signaled the waiter for the check, fully prepared to pay for both of our meals just so I could get out of there faster. But Claire apparently had other plans. When the check arrived, she didn't even pretend to reach for her purse. She just sat there, scrolling through Instagram like it was the most natural thing in the world. Don't worry, she said, without looking up. You've got this, right? I stared at her for a long moment, debating whether to call her out or just cut my losses. In the end, my southern manners won out, and I paid the bill. But as we walked out of the restaurant, she had the nerve to say, So, when are we hanging out again? I stopped in my tracks, turned to her, and said, Claire, you're a lot of things, but subtle isn't one of them. I think we're done here. Her mouth fell open, but I didn't stick around to hear whatever excuse she was about to throw at me. I just walked to my truck, got in, and drove straight home. They say dating in Los Angeles is like trying to find a parking spot in Hollywood on a Friday night. Impossible, frustrating, and if you do find one, it's probably a trap. Still, I kept trying. I'm Brianna, 29, a screenwriter trying to break into the industry. My days are spent writing scripts, taking meetings where people tell me I'm so close, and wondering if I'll ever stop eating ramen for dinner. My dating life? Well, let's just say I've had better luck pitching rom-coms to Netflix than finding one in real life. But then I matched with him. His name was Jake. His Tinder bio said actor, dreamer, lover of life. His profile picture was black and white. Of course it was, showing him staring off into the distance like he was pondering the meaning of existence. Normally, I'd swipe left on that kind of artsy nonsense, but hey, I was bored. We started chatting, and I'll admit, he was charming. He asked about my screenwriting, told me he'd love to collaborate creatively someday, and even quoted a few lines from Casablanca. I figured, okay, maybe this guy's a little dramatic, but at least he seems interesting. When he suggested we meet up for drinks at a rooftop bar in downtown LA, I thought, why not? A little drama never hurt anyone, right? I got to the bar first. It was one of those trendy places with overpriced cocktails and a view of the city that almost made you forget you were surrounded by smog. I grabbed a seat and ordered a Moscow Mule, trying not to think about how much it was going to cost. Then Jake walked in, and let me tell you, he didn't just enter, he arrived. He was wearing a leather jacket, sunglasses at night, and a scarf that looked like it had been stolen from the wardrobe department of a French New Wave film. He strolled across the bar like he was auditioning for the role of mysterious loner who changes your life. Brianna, he said, pulling off his sunglasses and giving me a smolder that would have made James Dean proud. Jake, I said, trying not to laugh. He sat down, ordered a whiskey neat, and leaned in like he was about to tell me a secret. I have to warn you, he said, his voice low and serious. I'm in character right now. In character? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Yes, he said, nodding solemnly. I'm preparing for a role. A brooding artist haunted by his past. I hope you don't mind. Mind? Oh, I minded. But I was also curious. What does one even do in this situation? Do you play along? Do you call them out? I decided to humor him for now. So, I said, taking a sip of my drink, what's this role you're preparing for? He sighed, staring off into the distance like he was trying to summon a monologue. It's a short film, he said finally. Very indie. Very raw. It's about the human condition, love, loss, regret. Sounds deep, I said, trying not to roll my eyes. It is, he said, nodding. The director is a genius. She's only 19, but she has the soul of an old poet. Ah, there it was. The LA trifecta. Indie film, pretentious director, and an actor who thinks he's the next Daniel Day-Lewis. Jake spent the next half hour talking about his craft. He told me about the time he lived in a cabin in the woods for 6 months to prepare for a role as a hermit, The film was never finished, by the way. He described how he once ate nothing but canned beans for 2 weeks to get into the mindset of a man stranded on a deserted island. Acting isn't just pretending, he said, leaning in like he was about to reveal the secrets of the universe. It's being. Uh-huh, I said, wondering if I could sneak another drink without him noticing. Things took a turn when the waiter accidentally spilled a glass of water on Jake's scarf. Oh no, I said, grabbing a napkin to help. But Jake held up a hand. Don't, he said, his voice dripping with melodrama. It's fine. I froze, napkin in hand, as he slowly removed the scarf, draping it over the back of his chair like it was a fallen soldier. This, he said, pointing to the wet fabric, is a metaphor. Life is messy. Imperfect. You can't just wipe it away. I stared at him, trying to decide if he was serious. He was. Right, I said, setting the napkin down. By the time the check arrived, I was mentally drafting the text I was going to send my best friend. If I ever suggest dating an actor again, slap me. Jake, still deep in character, insisted on paying. A true gentleman doesn't let a lady pay, he said, flashing me a smile that probably worked on starry-eyed casting directors. I thanked him, mostly because I didn't want to argue, and we headed for the door. Can I walk you to your car? He asked, his tone still dripping with brooding intensity. Sure, I said, figuring he couldn't possibly ruin the walk to the parking garage. I was wrong. As we walked, Jake started reciting poetry. Not just any poetry, his own poetry. The city lights, he began, his voice low and dramatic, are like broken stars scattered across the asphalt sky. Oh wow, I said, trying not to laugh. Did you write that? Yes, he said, nodding solemnly. It's part of a collection I'm working on. I call it Fragments of a Shattered Soul. Of course he did. When we finally reached my car, I turned to him, ready to say thanks but no thanks. But before I could get a word out, he grabbed my hand. Brianna, he said, staring into my eyes. This has been transformative. Uh-huh, I said, pulling my hand away. Well, thanks for the drinks. Good luck with your, character. He nodded, like he was accepting an award. And good luck with your screenwriting, he said. You have a gift. Ikan sensei talia. I didn't bother correcting him. I just got in my car, drove home, and immediately deleted Tinder. The next day, I told my roommates about the date. Wait, one of them said, laughing so hard she was crying. He stayed in character the whole time? Yep, I said, shaking my head. The whole time. Wow, she said. At least you got a good story out of it. And she was right, because now, I'm working on a new screenplay. It's about a woman who goes on a date with a guy who takes method acting way too far. I'm thinking of calling it The Actor Who Wouldn't Stop Acting. Alright, let's roll into Detroit, Michigan, where Sean, a straight-shooting mechanic with a good heart, ends up on a date with someone who, well, might just be on the FBI's watch list. This one gets wild. When you're a mechanic in Detroit, you don't have a lot of time for nonsense. My days are spent under the hood of cars, getting grease under my nails, and making sure people can get where they're going. Pretty simple, right? But life outside the shop. Not so simple. I'm Sean, 33, and single, not for lack of trying, but because dating in this city is like trying to fix a car that's been sitting in a junkyard since '96. You think it's gonna work out, but then the wheels fall off. So after my buddy Tony wouldn't shut up about how he met his girlfriend on OkCupid, I figured, what the hell. I signed up, made a profile, and wrote something like, I fix cars, love dogs, and can grill a mean steak. Looking for someone who doesn't play games. 3 days later, I matched with her. Her name was Vanessa. She had dark eyes, a killer smile, and this energy in her profile that just jumped off the screen. Adventurous, spontaneous, and always up for a little danger, it said. I probably should have taken that last part more seriously, but hindsight's 20/20ths. Vanessa messaged me first, which I liked. She had this confidence about her that was refreshing. We talked for a couple of days about music. She loved classic rock, which scored her major points. Food, she said she made the best enchiladas I'd ever tasted, and her love of thrill-seeking. What kind of thrill-seeking? I asked, imagining skydiving or something. Oh, you know, she replied, just breaking rules, living on the edge. I figured she meant she liked to speed a little or jaywalk. I had no idea how wrong I was. She suggested we meet up for dinner at a little diner downtown. I showed up 5 minutes early, like I always do, because my dad taught me that being late is disrespectful. Vanessa, on the other hand, rolled in 15 minutes late, wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses even though it was 9 p.m. "Sean," she said, sliding into the booth with a grin. "Sorry I'm late. I got held up." "Held up?" I repeated. "Don't worry about it," she said, waving her hand. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't press her on it. Everyone's got their quirks, right? We ordered burgers and milkshakes, and the conversation was good, great even. She was funny, quick-witted, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I was starting to think, wow, maybe this could actually go somewhere. And then things got weird. "So," she said, leaning forward with a sly smile, "are you the kind of guy who likes to take risks?" "Depends," I said, eyeing her warily. "What kind of risks are we talking about?" Vanessa grinned. "Come on. Let's make this night a little more exciting." "Exciting how?" "Let's steal something." I blinked at her, thinking I must have misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Let's steal something. Nothing big, just like a little thrill." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "You're kidding, right?" I said. "Nope," she said, popping the P like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "I'm a mechanic, not a criminal." "Relax," she said, laughing. "I'm just trying to have some fun. You've never done anything crazy before?" "Not that kind of crazy," I said, shaking my head. I thought that would be the end of it, but Vanessa wasn't letting it go. "Okay, fine," she said. "No stealing. But what about borrowing?" "Borrowing what?" I asked, already regretting this date. She leaned in, lowering her voice like we were plotting a bank heist. "There's a boat docked down by the river. It's just sitting there all lonely. We could take it for a little spin, have a moonlit adventure." "Vanessa," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose, "do you even know how to drive a boat?" "How hard could it be?" she said, shrugging. That's when I realized she was completely serious. This wasn't some flirty, adventurous act. This woman genuinely wanted to borrow a boat in the middle of the night. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I'm all for having fun, but I don't think stealing, borrowing, a boat is the kind of fun I'm looking for." Vanessa pouted, like a kid who'd just been told she couldn't have dessert. "You're no fun," she said, crossing her arms. "Maybe not," I said, grabbing the check, "but at least I won't end up in jail tonight." I paid for dinner, because my mama raised me right, and walked Vanessa to her car, which, by the way, had tinted windows so dark it looked like they were painted on. "You sure you don't want to come?" she asked, leaning against the driver's side door. "I'm sure," I said, holding back a laugh. "Your loss," she said with a wink before hopping into her car and speeding off. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But the next morning, I woke up to a news alert on my phone. Abandoned boat found adrift on Detroit River. I clicked on the article, and there it was, a picture of the exact boat Vanessa had been talking about. Apparently, someone had taken it for a joyride and then left it floating in the middle of the river. I sat there, staring at my phone, wondering if I should call the cops. But what was I going to say? "Hi, I think my OkCupid date might have stolen a boat last night." Needless to say, I never saw Vanessa again. She texted me a couple of days later with a casual, "Hey, had fun the other night. Want to hang out again?" I didn't respond. Boston's a tough town, and I don't just mean the Winters or the Red Sox fans. It's tough because everyone's in your business. You can't even get a coffee without someone asking, "So, you seeing anyone these days?" And when you're a firefighter like me, single at 36, the questions don't stop. "Mike, you're a good guy. Why aren't you married yet? You're great with kids. You'd make a great dad. Do you want me to set you up with my cousin's friend's hairdresser?" It's like the whole city's plotting to get me hitched. So yeah, after enough badgering from my sister, I decided to give Match.com a shot. I wasn't looking for anything crazy, just a nice woman who could hold a conversation and maybe didn't mind that my clothes always smell faintly of smoke. That's how I ended up matching with Katie. Katie seemed normal enough at first. She said she loved the outdoors, had a cute golden retriever named Max, and worked as an accountant. Her profile mentioned she was close with her family, which I thought was nice. Family's important, you know? But let me tell you, there's close with your family, and then there's what I was about to experience. We agreed to meet at an Italian restaurant in the North End. I'm a sucker for a good plate of chicken parm, and she said she loved the place, so it seemed like a win-win. I got there a little early, as usual. That's just me, I'm always on time. Katie walked in exactly at 7 o'clock, which I appreciated. She had a nice smile, dark hair pulled back into a ponytail, and she was wearing a red sweater that made her look like she'd just stepped out of a Christmas card. "Mike," she said, smiling as she walked up to the table. "Katie," I said, standing up to shake her hand because I have manners. "So far, so good." Then she turned to the door, waved, and said, "Mom, over here." I swear to God, I thought I misheard her. But no. In walked a woman who looked like an older version of Katie, wearing a floral blouse and carrying one of those giant purses that could double as a suitcase. "This is my mom, Linda," Katie said, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Hi, Mike," Linda said, reaching out to shake my hand. "It's so nice to meet you." I stood there, frozen, wondering if I was on some hidden camera show. Now, let me be clear, I'm not against family. I love family. But bringing your mom to a first date? That's a bold move, even by Boston standards. Katie must have noticed the look on my face because she laughed and said, "Hope you don't mind. My mom and I are really close, and I thought it'd be fun for her to join us." "Fun," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Yeah, sure. What was I supposed to say? No, I mind. Please send your mom home." Linda sat down next to Katie, and I ended up across from both of them, like I was being cross-examined in court. The waiter came by, and I immediately ordered a beer. I don't even like to drink on first dates, but something told me I was going to need it. Katie and Linda both ordered glasses of Chardonnay. "So Mike," Linda began, clasping her hands on the table like she was about to interview me for a job. "Katie tells me you're a firefighter?" "That's right," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "Wow," she said, nodding approvingly. "That must be so rewarding." "It has its moments," I said, trying to keep it light. "And dangerous," she added, her eyes widening. "Do you ever get scared?" "Not really," I said with a shrug. "You get used to it." Linda looked impressed, but Katie just smiled and said, "Mom, don't interrogate him." "I'm not interrogating," Linda protested. "I'm just curious." I smiled politely, but I was already planning my escape route. The food arrived, and I thought maybe things would calm down once we started eating. Nope. "So Mike," Linda said between bites of her pasta, "do you own your own home, or are you renting?" I nearly choked on my chicken parm. I rent," I said, glancing at Katie, who didn't seem fazed at all by her mom's question. "Oh, that's smart," Linda said, nodding. "No need to rush into buying. But you're saving up, right?" "Mom," Katie said, laughing. "What?" "It's an important question," Linda said, turning back to me. "You are saving, aren't you?" Yeah," I said, wishing I'd ordered a second beer. Katie finally stepped in and changed the subject, asking me about my family. I told them about my sister, who's married with 2 kids, and my parents, who retired to Florida last year. "Oh, so you're good with kids?" Linda asked, her eyes lighting up. "Sure," I said, nodding. "I'm Uncle Mike. It's part of the job." "That's wonderful," Linda said, beaming. "Katie's always wanted a big family." "Mom," Katie said, this time looking genuinely embarrassed. "What?" Linda said innocently. "I'm just saying." By the time dessert rolled around, I was ready to fake a fire emergency just to get out of there. But the final straw came when Linda pulled out Katie's phone. "Here," she said, swiping through the screen and turning it toward me. "These are some pictures of Katie from our trip to Italy last year. Isn't she beautiful?" Katie groaned. "Mom, stop," she said, trying to grab the phone. "What?" Linda said, holding it out of reach. "He should see how pretty you are." "Yeah, I can see that just fine," I said, trying to hide my discomfort. Linda finally put the phone down, and Katie looked at me apologetically. "Sorry," she said. "My mom can be a little much." "A little?" I said, raising an eyebrow. Katie laughed, and for a moment, I thought maybe this date could still be salvaged. Then Linda said, "So Mike, when do you think you'll propose?" I almost fell out of my chair. The check arrived shortly after that, and I've never been so relieved to pay for a meal in my life. Katie offered to split it, but I waved her off. "I've got it," I said, partly because I'm a gentleman and partly because I just wanted the night to be over. Linda gave me a big hug on the way out. "It was so nice meeting you, Mike," she said. "You're such a catch." "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. Katie walked me to my car and said, "Sorry about my mom. She just really wants me to find a good guy." "I get it," I said, nodding. "She's passionate." Katie laughed. "Yeah, that's one way to put it." We exchanged polite goodbyes, and I drove home, shaking my head the whole way. The next day, Katie texted me. "So want to do it again sometime?" "Just me, I promise." I thought about it for a minute, but then I remembered Linda's interrogation. I replied, "You're great, but I don't think we're a match. Best of luck." You know that feeling when you meet someone, and everything just seems to click. Like you're both into the same stuff, you have similar values, and for a second, you think, wow, maybe this could actually work out. Yeah, that's how I felt when I matched with Rachel. Spoiler alert, I was dead wrong. I'm Lila, 28, vet tech, professional dog cuddler, and self-proclaimed animal whisperer. I spend most of my days taking care of other people's pets, so it's not exactly easy to meet new people. That's how I ended up on Plenty of Fish, swiping through profiles and hoping to find someone who wouldn't roll their eyes when I talked about my dream of opening a no-kill animal shelter someday. Rachel seemed perfect. Her profile said she loved animals, worked as a wildlife photographer, and had a rescue dog named Buster. She even had a picture of her holding a baby goat, which was basically my kryptonite. We started chatting, and she was funny, sweet, and super passionate about nature. When she suggested we meet up for coffee, I thought, why not? What's the worst that could happen? Turns out, I was about to find out. We met at this cute little cafe near downtown Portland. I got there early and snagged a table by the window. Rachel showed up a few minutes later, wearing a flannel shirt, ripped jeans, and hiking boots. She looked like she'd just stepped off the cover of Hipster Outdoor Adventures Monthly, which was kind of charming. "Lila," she said, giving me a big smile as she sat down. "It's so great to finally meet you." "You too," I said, already feeling at ease. We ordered our drinks, an oat milk latte for me, a black coffee for her, and started chatting. She told me about her work photographing wildlife, and how she'd recently spent a month in Alaska documenting bald eagles. I told her about my job at the animal clinic, and how I'd once had to wrestle a Great Dane into a bathtub. We were laughing, sharing stories, and I was starting to think, wow, maybe this could actually be something. And then she asked, "So, do you want to come back to my place? I'd love to show you my collection." "Collection?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I think you'll really appreciate it." Now, I know what you're thinking. Normally, if someone invites you back to their place on a first date, it's a red flag. But Rachel seemed so genuine, and I figured, hey, maybe she's got a cool art collection or something. So like an idiot, I said yes. We drove to her apartment, which was in one of those old brick buildings with ivy creeping up the side. It was cozy, with plants everywhere and this faint smell of lavender. For a second, I thought, okay, this isn't so bad. Then she walked over to a cabinet in the corner, pulled open the doors, and said, "Here it is." At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. There were shelves lined with glass domes, each one containing, well, something that used to be alive. Birds, squirrels, mice, even a fox, all perfectly preserved and posed like they were in the middle of some woodland tea party. "Isn't it beautiful?" Rachel asked, her voice full of pride. I said, trying to find the right words. "You said you loved animals," she added, turning to me with a smile. "So I thought you'd appreciate my taxidermy collection. Now, let me be clear, I do love animals. Alive ones. Ones that wag their tails and purr and occasionally chew on your shoes. Not ones that are stuffed and staring at you with glass eyes that seem to follow you around the room." "Oh wow," I said, forcing a smile. "This is impressive." "Right," Rachel said, beaming. "I started collecting a few years ago, and it's just become a passion of mine. I even learned how to do it myself." "You do this yourself?" I asked, my stomach doing a little flip. "Yeah," she said, nodding enthusiastically. "It's such an art form, you know, preserving life in a way that tells a story. Like this one." She pointed to a raccoon posed like it was holding a tiny fishing pole. "I found him on the side of the road after he got hit by a car. Poor little guy. But now he's part of something beautiful." I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to someone who thinks turning roadkill into home decor is beautiful? "Wow," I said again, because my brain couldn't come up with anything else. Rachel must have noticed my hesitation because she said, "You don't like it, do you?" No, it's not that," I said quickly. "It's just unexpected." She nodded, looking thoughtful. "I get it. Taxidermy isn't for everyone. But I think it's a way to honor the animals, you know, to keep their spirit alive." "Right," I said, nodding like a bobblehead. She smiled, clearly satisfied with her explanation, and I decided it was time to wrap this up. "Listen," I said, glancing at my watch even though I wasn't wearing one. "This has been great, but I should probably get going." "Oh, already?" she said, looking disappointed. "I was going to show you my workshop." "Your workshop?" "Yeah," she said, her face lighting up again. "Where I do the taxidermy. You'd love it, it's so cool." I'm not proud of what I did next, but I panicked. "Oh no," I said, slapping my forehead. "I just remembered, I left the oven on at home. I should, probably go take care of that. Rachel blinked at me, clearly confused. You left the oven on? Yep, I said, already grabbing my jacket. I mean, it's probably fine, but, safety first. Oh, she said, frowning. Okay. Well, maybe we can hang out again soon. Definitely, I said, lying through my teeth as I bolted for the door. I drove home in silence, replaying the date in my head and wondering how I'd missed all the red flags. Adventurous and wildlife lover apparently meant collects dead animals. Good to know. The next day, Rachel texted me. Hey, hope everything's okay with your oven. Let me know when you want to hang out again. I didn't have the heart to ghost her, so I sent back a polite, "You're great, but I don't think we're a match. Good luck."